Hi, and welcome to the Rowe team's monthly real estate market update. Today, we're going to go through some of the monthly trends and the data that gives you a picture of what's happening in the real estate market. And we're going to look more locally. When I say locally, I mean in terms of the Chicago area. As always, there's a lot of interesting things going on in the market, and there continues to be some early signs of a potential swing in the market direction. So stick around and we'll go through and discuss it. The first thing I like to do is take a look at an article or two that talks about the real estate market. And since it's early in the year, I thought let's take a look at some of the predictions for trends for the year. So we're going to take a look at an article that was in Forbes magazine. The article is entitled Housing Market Predictions for 2024. And here's a few of the key takeaways from the article. Number one, they expect a softening on prices. Number two, they believe the Fed is done raising interest rates and will likely cut the interest rates for 2024. Now, there's not a direct correlation between the Fed rates and mortgage rates, but there's definitely a relationship. So if the Fed begins to cut, it's likely going to lower interest rates for mortgages. The third point that they made is that a pent-up demand for real estate and low inventory will keep prices high. This is something I've been saying for a while. They also don't expect to see much likely increase in inventory unless the rates get into the 5% area. They believe this because if you look at the vast pool of mortgages across the United States, a large percentage are around 5%. So it stands to reason that a lot wouldn't be motivated to move unless they could swap out at mortgage rates about the same. Now, real estate is definitely dependent on the local market and can be very different from one location to another. That said, I always like to look at the national picture as well as the local picture, because I think it helps to have a broader understanding of the market and how that might impact the local market. And even though the severity of ups and downs might be different by locale, generally the trends are very similar. I'll typically take a look at the national data first and then move to the local data. So let's take a look at the thing that's been in the news for really the last year and a half, and that's interest rates. It's obviously one of the key drivers in the market. For a frame of reference, a 30-year mortgage rate was at an all-time low a few years ago when it was a little over 2%. Since then, it's risen rapidly and approached 8% this year. As you can see from this graph, while the rates rose most of the year, they began to decline the last couple months of the year. Today, rates are about 6.75%. As we've discussed before, these higher rates are definitely putting a wet blanket over the market. The combination of a lot of things, including higher interest rates, has really frustrated buyers and has really kept the number of closed real estate transactions down this year. In fact, as rates began to increase over the last 3 years, you'll see that the total number of real estate transactions for residential real estate has dropped each of the last 3 years. So let's start taking a look at the actual sales for the last year. As I mentioned, sales has continued to decline. This first graph shows the data from the National Association of Realtors. As you can see, sales peaked around summer and has continued to decline through the end of the year. Now, on a year-over-year basis, sales is down in 2023 7.3% for single-family homes compared to 2022. And for condos, it's down 6.8%. Now, locally, sales have also continued to decline from the highs in the summer. Now, as you can see from this graph, sales year over year are down about 16% for single-family homes and 21.7% for condos. And this graph also shows there's been a steady decline year over year for the last 3 years. And overall, this decline has been pretty dramatic. In 2021, there was approximately 103,000 single-family homes sold. Now that compares in 2023 to only 71,000 units. That decline is even more dramatic when you look at the condo marketplace. In 2021, 54,000 units were sold. And in this past year, only 35,000 units were sold. So what's driving this lack of transactions? Well, it's a combination of increased rates. They're a lot higher than they were a few years ago. A lack of inventory could be partially driven because of the higher rates and people being unable to afford new properties, but it's also people are locked into lower rates that already own homes, and they're a little reluctant to give that up unless they have to. In other words, if they have to move because their family is increasing in size or shrinking in size, or they're moving, relocation for work, those types of things that cause people to have to move. Now, none of that looks to be changing dramatically in the near term. So as you can see from this graph of the national levels of inventory, we started the year at a pretty low level compared to previous years. And then that inventory actually declined. going into the summer. However, in the fall, it has creeped up a little bit. Nothing dramatic, and we're still at levels that were below where we were at this time last year. Now, the local market looks similar. We started the year at relatively low levels of inventory compared to previous years. That inventory declined going into the summer, but then started to pick up. However, at the end of the year, you saw it tail off again. And right now, inventory is actually at the lowest level it's been in over a year. We're down approximately 30% over where we were last year for both single-family homes and condos. That's a pretty big number. So is that likely going to change in the near future? Well, for that, we're going to take a look at the new listings. Obviously, new listings are inventory coming into the market. And unfortunately, as you can see from this slide, while we did get a number of new listings in the middle of the year, it's been steadily declining the back half of the year. Now, some of that is seasonal, but still, given the low levels of inventory and the relatively low levels of new listings, this dynamic of a shortage of inventories does not look to be changing in the near future. So what does that mean to you? Well, if you're looking to buy a home, you're going to have to look hard and probably take longer to find a home because there's less to choose from. And when you do find a home that you like, you want to make sure you make a very competitive offer because you're not going to have a lot of different options to choose from. So make sure you plan on a longer period of time to find something and make sure you're aggressive on the deal that you want. So let's take a look at how long it takes to sell a home. The days on market has continued to creep up in 2023 for single-family homes compared to where it was in 2022. That number currently stands at 44 days on average for a single-family home, and that's up 13% from 2023. Condos and townhomes are similar, and it takes about 45 days on average to sell a condo or townhome. Now, that's actually declined from last year of about 6%. So that means if you're looking to sell your home, you can expect it might take longer than what you were hearing it took a year ago. I'll also tell you, while I don't have the exact data to back this up, I can tell you from our team's experience, higher-priced homes are taking longer than they were. The lower-priced home and mid-priced home are still going pretty quickly if they're in decent shape and presented well. So make sure you plan accordingly, depending on your price range and your expectations for how fast it will take to sell your home. So now let's take a look at the balance between the available inventory and how fast that's being absorbed in the market. We can see that through a statistic that's called months supply of inventory. And what this does is it takes a look at the available inventory and the current rate of transactions and figures out how many months supply of inventory there is. An increasing number would likely show a slowing market with a lot of inventory. It's also a reflection of who has the power in the negotiating process. Now, typically when we look at this number, most people think that 0 to 3 months of inventory supply means that the power is largely in the seller's hands. 3 to 6 months, it's much more of a neutral situation depending on the specific house and how bad the people want it. And then over 6 months supply is typically considered a buyer's market, where the buyers have a little more power than the sellers. And over the last few years, it's definitely been a market that's in the hands of the sellers. However, that's beginning to change. If you look at the national statistic, that number has been over 3 months supply for most of last year, and that number is continuing to increase. So that number's been rising nationally since May. We have currently almost 4 months supply of inventory nationally for single-family homes. And that same trend is occurring in condos, but there's only about 3.5 months supply of condos nationally based on the current rate of transactions. So now let's take a look at where we are locally. It's a little different picture locally. Both the month supply of single-family homes and condos is still relatively low. Single-family homes is about 1.6 months supply, and condos and townhouses is holding steady at about 1.4 months supply. And this is still well below that 3 months demarcation that I talked about where the market is kind of neutral. So as long as we have this little inventory, you're likely going to see prices holding very steady. So that means if you're a buyer, you need to be aggressive with your offer if you plan on getting that home. It does look like nationally we may be turning a corner and getting to a more normalized market in terms of supply relative to demand. Now, if you look at the list price versus the price that it was actually sold at in the Chicago area, we were really just about 100% for a good chunk of last year. That number has decreased and is between 98 and 99%. It hasn't decreased a lot, but it has definitely come down a little bit, which even though we're still at a small amount of months supply of inventory, it's clear that that it's getting a little bit weaker. And again, you're seeing that definitely more in the more expensive homes than you are in the less expensive homes. So let's take a look at what's happening to pricing. We can see from this national graph that housing prices have declined from their peak in the summer. However, we're still up year over year. And the same is true for condos. Now let's take a look at what's happening more locally. It's a similar story with pricing, having peaked in the summer and declined since the summer. However, we're still up year over year. Single-family homes are up a little over 1% year over year, and condos are up over 6% year over year. In terms of trying to anticipate where prices are going, there's a lot of factors that we need to consider. One is the mortgage rates. Second is the available inventory. And last, it's what can people afford. The affordability index is a measure of how affordable a house is to the average person. It takes a look at the average median sales price, and it takes a look at the average median income and comes up with an index. And an index of 100 means that a good number of people can afford to purchase a home. Now, as you can see from this national graph, the affordability has dropped from over 100%, and it got as low as 90-ish%. It's creeped back up to about 95%, which I think is a reflection. If you remember, we showed how rates declined in the last couple of months of the year, and I think that corresponding uptick in affordability is largely due to rates. Now, just as a comparison, in the year 2020, the affordability index nationally was 170. And in 2021, that had dropped to 148. So now seeing numbers below 100 is a pretty substantial drop. And you can see the pain that the average American is feeling in terms of trying to be able to afford a house. Now, if we take a look at the local affordability index, we're in better shape than they are across the country. Now, that number has dipped below 100 for single-family homes, but it is back on the rise, approaching 100. And for condos, that number has sustained above 100 through the entire year. In order for this to change, it's going to take, again, some combination of drop in interest rates, increase in people's salaries, or a decrease in housing prices. So overall, where are we? Well, we continue to have an environment with low inventory. It doesn't look like it's going to change in the near future, even though the actual number of transactions is decreasing. So have the number of new listings. You are seeing inventory creeping up a little bit. You can see that with your month's supply of homes. In the United States, it's over 3 months supply. In the local area, it's under 2. So even though it's crept up a little here, it's not where it is nationally, and it's still a very depressed amount of inventory. So if you're a seller, it's still a good time to sell. Although for higher end homes, you can expect that it's going to take longer, and we're not seeing nearly the activity that we were. For lower priced homes, there's still a lot of activity, and even though the demand is down, there's so little inventory, they're still going pretty quickly if you have a place that looks good and is in good repair and is presented well. It does look like the market is starting to soften a little bit. We're starting to see prices sold against list price coming down a little bit, but it's still very high. It's 98 to 99%, and I think that's due to the inventory. So it's going to take some combination of lower interest rates, lower prices to bring people back into the market because of the affordability. If the pontificators are right, you should start seeing the Fed lowering rates. And while there's not 100% correlation to mortgage rates, there's definitely a relationship, and we should see the mortgage rates coming down. You're going to see pricing probably holding pretty steady just because of lack of inventory. When you start seeing more inventory, and you still see few transactions relative to where we have been, that's when you're going to see pricing take a hit. So it's still a pretty good time to sell. It will take longer. If you're looking to buy, there's not a lot to choose from. So if you see something you like, get on it, be aggressive, make a compelling offer to get it, and figure out it's going to take you longer to buy than you might expect. So give yourself more time and expect a little more frustration in the process. I'm Kevin Rowe, and I'm part of the Rowe team. We've been serving this market for over 35 years, and we'd love to help you if this is the year you're looking to buy or sell a house. Please reach out to us. Check out our YouTube channel, where you can see a lot of helpful videos on the sales process or buying process of real estate, and we put all kinds of useful information on that. And again, we'd love to help you. Give us a call, like and subscribe if you don't want to miss anything that we produce. We appreciate any sharing or the subscriptions that you do to our channel. Thanks so much, and we look forward to working with you at some point in time. Thanks.